I think the top three things that an inclusive leader should be thinking about right now is, first of all, listening. There's so much that is unfolding day by day in our external world. We must be looking at our employees' experience outside of the virtual walls, the four walls, used to be physical walls. But regardless, what we're bringing into work is so impacted by what's happening in the external world. And this is truer and truer for our talent, particularly our younger generations of talent, because that generation values social issues deeply and is deeply aware because of social media, and expects a level of transparency and the naming of what's happening in the world that impacts our ability to bring our full selves to work, as we say. And so the point I want to make is that what we should be listening for if we are inclusive leaders, and this doesn't even mean leaders, because I have people reporting to me, this means leading at any level, really. All of us are inclusive leaders, right? To our colleagues, to our friends, to our communities. This goes beyond work as well. But the listening is so critical right now. Hearing voices, hearing emotion, and sharing in that emotion, and creating forums and containers for those discussions to occur is particularly important, to not just to give a space for that, but for organizations to listen and learn and take action from what is heard about what's happening. So, and this is I think a new focus of the last year. This all started back in the summer of 2020 in response to the murder of George Floyd. Organizations said there's so much we're getting wrong. There's so much we're silent on. There's so much we don't understand about what our employees are experiencing. We have not validated that well or at all historically. So we saw a huge change in many organizations, not all, but many humbled themselves publicly to say, what don't we understand? What are we not hearing? What are people endeavoring to leave at the door, now the virtual door, when we show up for work? And what kind of cost is that demanding of people of all different identities when so much is happening in our world that is frankly terrifying to a lot of us, to our safety in the world, to our loved ones, to our families. So I think we're having a really honest moment. And I hope it's a movement. It's not a moment. It's a continuing practice that we have in organizations going forward, which is that I'm listening, I'm endeavoring to understand, I am taking action, and then the checking back in to say, are the actions we're taking the right actions? And I think this points to the fact that we are all learning and figuring this out, and that we shouldn't make assumptions about what remedies look like or sound like. There may be a difference between, for example, well, we wrote a check, we are donating money, and yet leadership is not saying anything about the emotions that are being experienced, right? So there's different choices, and I think we need to do it all. We need to be, financially making commitments, but I think from a leadership perspective, we need to be stepping forward and saying, I am outraged. I am heartbroken. I am motivated to do something. I am investigating what I can do from where I sit in my sphere of influence, whether I'm in a community or not. We all have so much more that we could be doing, I think, so that we don't leave the work of change and the work of responding to those who are most impacted by everything that's going on right now. So I identify as an aspiring ally. I say aspiring because it's never a destination. It is something that is earned every day. And it's also, I'm aspiring because only someone else can deem me an ally. It's not something I put my badge on every day and say, I'm an ally. It's something I strive to be called. And I earn it or not every day with my actions. And so I investigate that and think constantly for my own inclusive leadership, what have I been given from an access perspective, a platform perspective? What voice can I have? What permission do I have to speak and push on things and challenge people? And where will I be heard differently, perhaps because of my identity and the assumptions that are made about, Jennifer's like us, which is interesting because I identify also as an LGBTQ plus woman, but that aspect of my identity is not visible unless I make it visible. And so it's just fascinating, I think, to locate ourselves in the change process. And once we locate ourselves there, the question is, how am I using everything that I've been given and everything that I possess and all of my identities, both marginalized and privileged and everything between, to activate, to change this reality so that, my colleagues and myself aren't facing such headwinds, when we go to perform, when we go to belong, when we go to feel engaged. We shouldn't feel interrupted. And we shouldn't feel that who we are doesn't matter. It very much matters. And so this is something we've got a lot of work to do, and organizations really have to reckon with. And I think it's a beautiful and amazing opportunity that we have in front of us. So every leader should be obviously a coach also, in addition to the other roles leaders play, like manager, mentor, sponsor. But that coaching piece, I think, is a beautiful way actually to unlock a truthful and vulnerable diversity, equity, and inclusion conversation. Coaching done in its best form invites and creates a space and invites someone to enter that, to be changed, to share, to reflect, to collaborate and brainstorm. And also what I love about it is that a true coach takes our own lens out of the picture. A true coach asks powerful questions without assuming that we know the right answers, right? That total kind of curiosity, that neutrality. And really the job of a great coach is to set the container and then create the psychological safety for someone to walk through that door and say, well, here's what's occurring for me. Here's what this feels like for me. Here's what I'm experiencing. Here's what I want to process. Here's what feels like is getting in my way. And so from where I sit as a DEI expert, that interaction, particularly between someone who needs support and someone who has support to give, is extremely powerful, because if we can create enough trust to be honest with each other, to say, I experience these microaggressions every day. I suspect that I was passed over for this opportunity because of bias, but I'm not sure. Or I'm in meetings and I feel my ideas aren't recognized, or worse, spoken over or stolen or misattributed, and I don't feel that anybody has my back. Or I'm worried that I am being viewed in this way in my career trajectory, and missing out on opportunities because I don't have a sponsor that has my back, right? Somebody that is speaking about me and praising me and bringing my name into the room. These are all things that are going on, I can tell you, because we study this every day. These are the I guess the things we keep to ourselves sometimes, and wonder if we're making them up, wonder if we're imagining them, don't want to be the squeaky wheel, certainly don't want to, upset things. However, if I'm afraid of upsetting things through asking questions and wanting to know answers, then clearly I don't work in the kind of environment where I can thrive, because what we really want is everyone to feel they can bring that full self and all those identities into the workplace and talk about them, talk about bias, talk about the microaggressions we hear, and seek help. And that help is not just, I'm gonna put my ally badge on and solve everything for you today. Remember, it's not that. It's providing the space for the conversation, and coaching, as I keep saying, is sort of best applied when it is a supportive mechanism that is completely open and curious to any answer that is given. And then questions, I think, on the coach's part, okay, now that I've had that conversation and opened those doors, what then is my responsibility? What do I have access to that I can change or shift or challenge or ask questions about, or be the squeaky wheel in solidarity with someone that is tired of being the squeaky wheel? So I want to answer your question by saying coaching is part one, But then I would add the advocacy that then has to happen as a response to that. You don't just want to listen, you want to do, you want to take action, you want to represent and carry forward the challenges that people feel that often when we're in an ally position are not our lived experience. And so the work of this is really educating ourselves about all the lived experiences that are playing out around us and being extremely invested in understanding where is that happening? Why is that happening? Who is it happening to? Noticing it doesn't happen for us. Realizing that these differences make a difference for people's journey. They just do. It's a fact. So if you don't know that after the year we've been through, then you need to do a lot more reading. And then the question to me is, so when do I take my coach hat off and I put my advocate hat on, right? I put my ally hat on. I put my, what we say, a co-conspirator hat on, and I want to differentiate that because some folks have different preferences with language, but sometimes those who aren't a fan of the word ally say it is a bit of standing on the shores and watching somebody struggle and drowning, and sort of from arm's length. And a co-conspirator would be jumping in the water and saying, I'm next to you, I'm here with you, I'm not, distancing myself to keep myself safe or out of the fray, I'm in the fray. So I would also challenge all of you to think about, when do you step in? How far in do you step? And how are you activating, far beyond some of these comfort zones that we have that we know we're going to seek, because humans like comfort. We like what's familiar. We like what's predictable. And yet this work is about actually getting comfortable being uncomfortable on a regular basis. So diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy, in my opinion, needs to be core to everything we do. Versus perhaps to the side, as it's traditionally been viewed, I think, as a sort of discrete or even siloed function, owned by a small number of people, and sometimes manifesting in unconscious bias training, for example. And we see managers say, "Oh, I sent everybody through the training, and my work is done." So it's definitely not done. And my second book, How to Be an Inclusive Leader, is really an invitation for the rest of us to step in a meaningful way. And I think provides a very reasonable and concrete roadmap to do just that, which is to say, this is all of our opportunity, truly, for leaders at all levels to evolve to the kind of leader that is known to value and welcome all identities and is somebody that people want to work with and for, because you've done your work and you've taken responsibility and ownership to say, I want to be the kind of leader that knows how to create psychological safety, that doesn't sweep difference under the rug, but actually sees it and seeks it, because I know that it's better for team outputs, for engagement, for business results, truly, who you have around the table and how we feel being around that table in terms of our willingness to contribute and our confidence that we will be heard and seen, and that our wisdom and our ideas and our insights will be acted upon. And so that's what I just described is essentially the definition of diversity and inclusion. Diversity is the who, it is who is gathered around the table, but the inclusion is really the how of, how do I feel at that table? If I'm at that table, am I silent? If I'm at that table, do I feel heard and considered and recognized? And I think that, so these two things go together, but they're not the same. But if we have this at the core of our practices, and we had organizations full of leaders and colleagues, by the way, because we can do this peer to peer. We can do it when we manage upwards as well. So I think of it as a 360-degree process. We can create inclusion around us constantly. We can monitor for it. We can be vigilant for it. We can notice who's not in the room. We can highlight invisible diversity dimensions that get passed over or not spoken and are not, therefore not understood or included. And we can speak up for inclusive behaviors or the lack thereof in every interaction that we have. And we can do that from any place that we are in the org chart. So the good news is, I think that more and more companies are realizing, wow, we haven't really embedded this. We've kind of left the work up to our diverse colleagues. So that might mean, and this has meant in the past, oh, well, I'm the only woman in the room. So if the question of representation comes up, everybody turns to me for the answer. And therefore, it means I always have to have the answer. I have to speak on behalf of a very diverse community of women, by the way, which is impossible. In addition to speaking for all LGBTQ people, right? Because I'm also, if I'm out at work, I'm put on the spot to answer all those questions, to do all of that emotional labor. But what I'd like to see is that it doesn't always come to me to have all the answers and to give all the guidance, but that there are aspiring allies who are studying my lived experience, that are taking on board the statistics and the research and the data and the noticing and the vigilance, and the ones that say, I want to speak about this. I'm noticing this. I have a problem with that. I want to give that feedback. I want to be that reminder, or that, that person who gives the feedback, so that Jennifer doesn't always have to feel that if she doesn't speak up, that nothing's going to happen. And I think what I just described is what leads to the levels of exhaustion in organizations for women and people of color and people with disabilities and LGBTQ people, and anybody who is underrepresented wants so much to stay and to thrive. And sometimes, though, feels like we have all the emotional labor on behalf of the organization to change the system. And by the way, a lot of us are at levels in organizations where we don't have the keys to changing the systems. In fact, leadership and in the org chart, and I do mean leadership now from a hierarchical standpoint, those at the top have more access and can change things more quickly than any of us can, and with less exhaustion from sort of bringing our full selves to work every day, feeling vulnerable, being challenged with what's going on in the world, and then having to show up and educate all day. So my plea and my call to action for aspiring allies is to say, lighten the load. Think about what we can do to carry this water. And let's not burden our employees who are endeavoring to literally put themselves together to show up every day, because there's so much tragedy in the news that just even doing that is a Herculean task. If we have that appreciation for that, I think, and if we came from that place of saying to ourselves, this is all of our responsibility, we would develop as humans, we would develop as leaders, because, by the way, every leader in the future who's successful is going to do all of this well. I mean, we know this because we will be leading teams that are majority not like us from a lived experience perspective. Every single one of us will be on teams, leading teams, working for leaders who don't share identities with us. And so those of us who are really adept and thoughtful about creating room for difference to be celebrated and valued, those of us who know how to create psychological safety, those of us who come with that coaching mentality, but also with that advocacy mentality to say, I'm going to be curious, I'm going to listen, but I'm going to take action too. And I'm going to influence what I can influence, what's within my sphere of influence. That's my job. And I think if we come from that place, there's a ton we can do. I don't want to hear, I'd like to not hear anymore, Jennifer, I just don't want to say the wrong thing, or I don't know what to do, because to me, there's so much we can be doing. And it doesn't need to be the grand gesture. It doesn't necessarily need to be the big public declaration. It's a lot of little conversations and a lot of networking, a lot of asking the right questions, a lot of applying pressure, a lot of, following up on what we've learned, and being that squeaky wheel in a way that some of us can be without taking a lot of the risk that other employees have to take to be the squeaky wheel. So let's think about it in that way. And I think that is a very, very doable, concrete, practical, very realistic task for all of us to take on every single day. How were you an advocate today? How did you follow up on something? What kind of conversation did you invite? What did you learn? Where were you uncomfortable for a moment, or for more than a moment, I hope? What are you getting better at as you learn? What are you deepening your knowledge about from an identity perspective? All of these things need to have a place on our calendar every single day, every single week. And as we grow, I promise it will get easier and we will become more confident in how to advocate. It's something just like every other skill. It's something that gets better with practice.